Hi, my name is Ben Shao. I'm going to talk about the Gold Rush experience for the Chinese for social science 180 diversity in the U.S. for Professor Dora Leo. The gold rush started when James Marshall discovered gold in California in 1848. This led a large migration from the eastern U.S. to California, but also many other immigrants came to the came to California to find gold. The Chinese, many ethnic group came to California, like the Mexican, the Japanese, and the Chinese, hoping to find gold. The Chinese not only found gold, but they also found prejudice, discrimination, and racism. Let's define racism, prejudice, and discrimination first. This is taken from our textbook from McLemore and Dale. Racism is defined as usually refers to an unfavorable attitude and perhaps an unfavorable action toward people who are members of a particular racial or ethnic group. It may or may not specify the type of relationship that exists between unfavorable attitude and actions, and the idea of group may be or less salient. McLemore Dale also explains that an attitude towards a race is prejudice. An action against a certain race is due to prejudice is discrimination. And if you're discrimination, that means you're also racist. A component of prejudice is stereotyping. As mentioned, the Chinese people immigrated to California looking for gold. They were not imported and they were not sold as slaves. The Chinese came to California hoping to find gold and sent the money back to China, to their village, and to their family. The Chinese that immigrated had no prior experience as an oppressed minority because they were the dominant group in China. They also heard that in California there's rivers of gold and there's mountains of gold. And as Rich explains, that the Chinese actually call California Gold Mountain. And Lillian Zhu said also explained that in California in 1848 there were only 400 Chinese. 2 years later, in 1850, there was 44,000 Chinese. They were the largest group of immigrant that came from overseas. Many of them were healthy and young and unmarried, hoping to find money. They call Lillian Zhu called them the birds of passage, but Chan calls them sojourners. That they only came to join the gold rush, and then once they find what they're looking for, they go back to China. Some misconception about the Chinese is that they were they were coolies. They were which are contract laborers, which is not true, because Chan tells us that the Chinese enter the gold field as miners, and they often claim abandoned placer claims, and which are claims that are already stripped of easily removable nuggets of gold and gold dust. And in some places, they were the only placer miners in the whole county. Now, the Chinese face many discriminations from the state and from people. From the California, they face several discrimination from laws. One of them is called the foreign miner tax, which California passed, which taxes foreign miners. It's a very high tax, and the main target they wanted to people that they want to target is the Chinese. Although it doesn't specify that they were targeting the Chinese, but that was their main idea. Another one is called the commutation tax. It requires all ships that arrive in California port to submit a list of all foreign passengers, and the ship had to post a bond of $500 for each individual. This the ship owners pass the money, the fee in to the passenger, which sometimes range from $5 to $50 per person. So they were the main targets. Uh, the governor of California at the time, Governor Bigler, also wanted to exclude the Chinese, and but he was denied because at the time the mining commissioners were basically in charge. So they did not want to exclude the Chinese because they don't want to anger the Chinese, and the Chinese also bring a lot of money to California from taxes from mining, and they're willing to pay the tax to the government. Then discrimination from people, for example, there were 60 miners that physically drove 200 Chinese from the American River. Later, another 400 Chinese was driven from the Horse Show Bar. Deer Creek is very anti-Chinese, and they made their own law. And these laws are the laws of miners set up, not from state, and they enforce it themselves. Which and the law goes like this: the Chinese can only buy and hold the ground that came from white owners and no one else. And Ridge also tells us that Mexican bandits raided the Chinese at Deer Creek. They killed 2 Chinese miners and got away with $30,000. The Chinese appeal for help and for protection, but they were ignored. And later on at Deer Creek, some of the 50 miners gathered together and ran the Chinese out of the district, break everything they had, burn up their cabinet, and tell them that if they reappear, they will shoot them. As mentioned, a component of prejudice is stereotyping, and the main source of the prejudice is from the people. Ridge tells us that the people have prejudice against the Chinese, their way of dress, the collaborative enterprises, their food, their eating habits, their mining practices, how they use opium, and especially their willingness to work mines considered unprofitable, and that made them victims. And they also fear the reason for the prejudice is because of fear. They fear that the Chinese are taking their source of gold and also their source of job. The Chinese sometimes they don't mine themselves. Instead, they are hired to mine, and they were willing to work for very low wage, which is taking job away from other miners. Now, the Chinese that are sick and tired of discrimination, they form a community together, which is called Chinatown now. They withdraw from society, and these little towns sprang up in New York and California. In California, there's San Francisco Chinatown and many other Chinatowns in California. But even then, they were still fear. Lillian Zhu tells us that the Chinatown were described as racialized minority ghettos by marginalized, unassimilable foreigners. And as years goes on, the fear of Chinese grew, which led to the Exclusion Act and other forms of legislative action against the Chinese. In conclusion, the Chinese had lived a life of hatred and for something that they didn't do. They were attacked many times by other ethnic groups, and the Chinese were at the bottom of the list. So they were attacked by Mexicans. They were below African Americans and below the Native Americans. They were denied a voice in America and often dismissed. Even in their own ethnic enclave, they were still feared by the rest of California, by the rest of the United States. And they had to fight really hard and have to struggle to gain their voice, their liberty, and their freedom. Thank you. This is my presentation. This is the end of